What is up, duelists, and welcome to Cool Tune format, much sooner than anticipated. So today I'm going to try my best to explain how that deck works and show you an example deck list as well as a couple of example games. The deck has landed in Master Duel, but I think this is also going to be very interesting for TCG players because this deck is going to hit TCG format and Blazing Dominion in just over 3 weeks. But it has hit Master Duel with the full support today, which is not something that I necessarily expected so early, but here we are. And if the OCG is anything to go by, it is a really strong force to be reckoned with in the format. So we'll talk about that. Try my best to explain how it works. I've played the deck in a TCG pre-support, and so I kind of understand how it works, but you know, it is still relatively new, so take it with a grain of salt. But I'm going to try to show you a deck list as well that you might expect or that you can start with if you're trying to learn the deck. Without further ado, hope you enjoyed today's video and you are as excited as I am for this new format. If you are, then let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get started. Alright, and here we are in Master Duel with an example deck list. I'll go into more detail on the list in a second, but first I want to explain what the deck does and what the cards do. It is, of course, a synchro-based strategy, but not only that, all of it is tuners. Like, all of the main deck monsters as well as the extra deck monsters for Cool Tune are going to be tuners. And you're going to wonder, how does that work? Well, all of the extra deck monsters allow you to make them with tuners as well. And you're going to be relatively limited to this as well, because a lot of the effects will lock you into only summoning tuners for the rest of the turn. So if you're ever wondering, like, hey, why does my opponent not summon this synchro from the extra deck or whatever, it's because a lot of the synchros are not tuners, so you can't make them in Cool Tune. And even if some synchros are tuners, most of them require non-tuners to make them, which this deck doesn't have many of. Like, they basically have to normal summon like a Fuwa, and that's the only way you can actually get to a non-tuner, but for the most part, you're not going to be able to. All of the main deck Cool Tunes share the same ability, which is that if this card on the field would be used as a synchro material, one tuner in your hand can be used as one of the other materials. This is something that every single Cool Tune monster has. Even a bunch of the ones in the extra deck have this, so you can essentially kind of like synchro climb like this by using cards from your hand. So essentially, when you see that a couple of these cards have the ability to on summon add a Cool Tune from your deck to your hand, that is essentially like summoning it to your field, because you're going to be able to synchro summon with it from hand. But you're circumventing something like a Mulcharmy Fuwalos. You're not special summoning the monster from your deck, you're adding it to your hand, and then you're synchro summoning with it. This is something that's important to note. These effects are not something that gets negated if you hit a Cool Tune monster with something like an Imperm or a Veiler. This is a condition on the card which a negation does not get rid of. So if you Imperm a Cool Tune monster on the field, you're preventing all of its effects except for the ability to synchro summon from their hand. So don't feel safe just because you've impermed their starter. They can still synchro with something from hand. All of this is about essentially making synchros and then triggering different graveyard effects, because a lot of the Cool Tune monsters, I think all of them, have an effect to varying degrees of relevance when they're sent to the graveyard as synchro material. So it's kind of like a synchro Draco Tail in that sense, if you will. So let's go over some of the cards. For the basic ones, we've got Cool Tune Mix, which if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Cool Tune monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except a level 2 monster. Important notice, something that I didn't realize when I played the deck for the first time in the TCG, you can add from graveyard with both of their searchers, which makes it a lot easier to cycle through stuff, but it also makes it so you can bell some of their starters. So this one adds a non-level 2 from deck to hand. And if this card is sent to grave as material, you can target a monster your opponent controls, destroy it, right? Very simple. Something you can also trigger on your opponent's turn a lot. So this is one of your main ways to remove monsters off the board. And it's, of course, a starter because you search something and then you can make a synchro with that right away. On the other hand, we have Cool Tune Reco, which is the exact same thing, but as a level 3. And instead of adding anything but a level 2, it adds anything but a level 3. So Cool Tune is level 2, adds anything but level 2. Cool Tune Reco is level 3. Adds anything but level 3. And if this card is sent to grave as synchro material, you can target a spell trap your opponent controls and destroy it, right? So these two are kind of like your bread and butter. They both search upon summon, and they both pop a card when they're sent to grave as synchro material. This one pops monsters, this one pops spell traps. The best starter for the deck, probably, I mean, the other two also work as starters, but this one is likely the best one. Cool Tune Q. If this card is normal summoned, you can special summon one tuner from your hand, deck, or grave, except Cool Tune Q. Also, for the rest of this turn, you cannot special summon except tuners, right? This is what I referred to earlier. This is one of the cards that's going to lock you into just tuners, but it does give you one of the best abilities in the deck, which is basically summon out any tuner If this card is sent to the grave as synchro material, you can excavate 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck, banish one of them. And this is where we're going to start into some of the more unique interruptions that Kewl has, or interactions rather. Kewl is a deck that obtains a lot of information about your opponent's game state. They even have other cards that let you look at your opponent's hand and extra deck, which is one of the most polarizing things about the Kewl archetype, I suppose, is that they gain so much knowledge about what your opponent has. And some people really dislike this, and they can even banish certain resources. So for example, Kewl Q, an effect that might read not as powerful. When I played this deck for the first time, I really underestimated how good this card was, because looking at the top 2 cards from your opponent's deck and being able to banish one of them basically lets you eliminate important resources. If you get lucky, you can hit a certain one of, but that's not what this is about. It's more so about, like, in the middle of the game, you're going to basically be able to decide your opponent's top deck, and you're going to know what they're going to draw. Unless both cards are good, then you banish one of them and put the other on the bottom. But for the most part, this level of manipulation is really strong in a mid-rangey, control-y strategy, which Kewl arguably is, because the ceiling of this deck isn't that high. Being able to know what your opponent is going to draw next turn makes it so much easier to navigate. And not only do you know what they draw, but you can also mess with it a little bit, right? If they have a really good card on top of the deck, banish it and let them draw the other one, right? So really powerful effect that I really underestimated when I played this deck for the first time. Of course, not the main reason you play the card, because the main reason you play the card is that it's one of the best starters you could possibly ask for, but it's also a phenomenal graveyard effect. Then we have Kewl Clip. I'm doing the old ones first because I know most about them. This one is your in-archetype hand trap, your 5 mana, if you will. During your opponent's main phase, if this card's in your hand, quick effect, you can special summon this card, then immediately after this effect resolves, you can synchro summon a tuner synchro monster. One of the main ways this deck interacts with the opponent is by performing synchro summons on the opponent's turn to then trigger your graveyard effects over and over and over again on your turn as well as on your opponent's turn, giving you more removal and other disruptive abilities that we're going to look at in a second. This one lets you do it as soon as turn 0. I will say for Kewl Clip, we're going to talk about this when we get to the extra deck cards. There's limited amount of things that you can do with it, because a lot of the Kewl extra deck requires certain names. So like they have corresponding extra deck monsters, right? And so if you don't draw Clip plus the matching stuff, then you might not be able to do something meaningful with it, which is why some builds have cut this card down to 1 or 2 in the OCG. But I'm playing 3 at the moment because we don't have Hydraulis Harmonia, which is a card that's also in Blazing Dominion. We've talked about it plenty on this channel, but it's not included in Master Duel, so we don't have to worry about it yet. But that's basically another tuner hand trap that this deck could play. So for now, I'm starting with 3 Kewl Clips. Might cut it down in the future. I wanted to see how it plays. So if this card is sent to grave as synchro material, you can banish a random face down card from your opponent's extra deck, but it is banished face up. So this is another one of those that's like polarizing, because like the main purpose of this card is of course being a hand trap, but its disruption, quote unquote, is really random, and in some games is not going to matter at all. And in other games, it could matter a lot because you're getting a random banish from the extra deck. Like, you know, in some games, you're just going to banish a random card that they were never summoning, like random Typhon when they go first or whatever. And in other games, you might, I don't know, go up against Tearlaments and banish their Kid Kalos turn 1. It's really weird. I think the idea of this is that you're supposed to rack up these effects over time, because the deck is more mid-rangey, lower ceiling. So it's like you're trying to buy time with this deck and apply these effects over and over and over again until you run your opponent out of key resources. But it does have this sort of like random variance to it where you could just hit a really important card on turn 1. So it's kind of polarizing in that matter, but the main purpose of it is being the hand trap interruption, of course. And it's not only a great turn 0 play, but even better if you go first, you can set it up for your opponent's turn. And then you're going to be way more likely to have the matching materials to do whatever you want with it, right? And of course, the synchros you summon with it are also going to have an effect. And then the newest member, I suppose in Master Duel, they're all releasing at the same time, but this card is very, very good support for this deck in Blazing Dominion, is Kewl Rotary. You can reveal this card and 1 tuner in your hand. Immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon a tuner. If this card is sent to the grave as synchro material, you can activate one of these effects, place a card from your opponent's grave on the bottom of their deck, or look at your opponent's hand. Then you can add a Kewl spell trap from your deck to your hand. This card is pretty custom support for Kewl because this deck was very weak to removal, because of course you can use the other monsters from your hand as material, but you need 1 on the field to do that. So even if you resolve your like searches and stuff like that, if your opponent has removal onto your monsters on the board, you're not synchro summoning. right? Which is sometimes really bad. But now that this card exists, you essentially have the ability to search an extender at any given moment. But not only that, it also lets you obtain perfect information on your opponent's hand, which is much easier to interrupt afterwards. And then you also add a Cool Tune spell trap from your deck to your hand, which the Cool Tune spell trap is amazing. So this card fills a lot of like weaknesses that this deck had previously and is perfect because also level 1 is something they didn't have before this card was made. So it allows for a lot more combinations on what kind of levels you can combine to make the extra deck monsters. So this card is insane for this deck. And another reason why some people dislike this is, of course, looking at your opponent's hand and being like, oh, you have one starter, I guess I know what the Veiler next turn or whatever, right, is understandably concerning depending on how the games go. But yeah, Cool Tune Rotary, phenomenal card for this deck. And then we have Cool Tune Synchro, which in my opinion is the best card in the archetype. It is a quick play spell card. Add a Cool Tune card from your deck to your hand, except Cool Tune Synchro. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can Synchro summon a Tuner Synchro monster. You cannot special summon for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, except tuners. You can activate up to 2 per turn. This card is amazing in so many ways. Of course, it's a starter, it's a Rota, so we don't have to talk about why that's good. But it's a quick play, which means that not only can you use it on your opponent's turn to summon your Synchros, which, as we've established, is important, because that lets you interrupt your opponent, because you're going to get all your graveyard effects, you're going to get all your Synchro effects on the opponent's turn, but it's quick play, meaning you can also use it on your own turn to dodge Imperm, Veiler, removal in general, right? I just mentioned, like, the deck can be weak to removal. This card solves that problem. And you get to dodge anything, you get to resolve your effects, and you get to do it twice per turn. The fact that this card is so good is also, it's kind of sad in some ways, because Cool Tune Playlist is the only Cool Tune card that no one's playing, because it's a trap. It's a good card. It's a cool disruption. It's a really awesome card that lets you like copy effects, like you target a Cool Tune on field or grave, and then you return it to the hand, and you apply the card's graveyard effect. It's an awesome card, but why play a trap to interrupt your opponent when you can just set up more copies of Cool Tune Synchro? Like, this card is so amazing. And then last but not least, we have JJ Cool Tune, which is their field spell. Unfortunately, not a starter for the deck, so that's why it's only one copy in most lists, but gives you an additional normal summon for a tuner monster, which is neat as an extender, right? If your opponent does have removal. Loudness War is an extra deck monster that gains 3,300 attack, but that's not that relevant. Sometimes it comes up. You contribute a tuner, add to your hand or special a Cool Tune monster from your deck. Also, you're locked into tuners for the rest of the turn. So it's a 1.5 card starter, I suppose. Like, you can pair this with like an Effect Veiler or a Ghost Bell or something like that, or an Ash Blossom, like tribute it and then get like an emergency teleport effect. But of course, that's not your ideal way to start playing, but it can work. So it's a good enough card to include, but I don't think it's a good enough card to play multiple copies of. The maximum I've seen people do with the new support is 2 copies, I think, but I'm sticking to 1 because you can search it. It's not that amazing. So that's the main deck. I guess one card to mention that's not technically a new card or even a Cool Tune card, but Synchro Overtake is a phenomenal card in this deck. This card is basically fusion deployment, but for synchros. You reveal a synchro in your extra deck and then choose one of the materials that is specifically mentioned on it. And like I said earlier, a lot of the Cool Tunes are mentioned on cards. So you can just special summon that monster from deck or grave, and you're locked into synchros for the rest of the turn. So this card, basically no drawback in this deck, is starter, extender, recursion because it can summon from graveyard. Phenomenal card. Extra deck, we have Cool Tune Trackmaker, which requires any Cool Tune tuner. This is one of the few generic ones, quote unquote, that you can make with any tuner. If this card on the field would be used as synchro material, one tuner in your hand can be used as one of the other materials. This is one of the extra deck monsters that has this effect. Not all of them do. If this card is special summoned, add any Cool Tune card from your deck to your hand. If this card is sent to the grave as synchro material, you can return a card your opponent controls to the hand. Very simple but efficient card, right? Add on summon and bounce on synchro. Really nice. Here's Cool Tune Remix. This one requires Cool Tune Mix, and this is, in my opinion, the most fun card in this deck, but it's level 5, so Cool Tune Mix being level 2, you want to add a level 3 into the mix. Gains 1,500 attack while your opponent has a tuner on field or grave. During your opponent's turn, quick effect. You contribute this card, choose 2 non-synchro tuners in your grave, add one of them to your hand. If you do special summon the other, then immediately after this resolves, you can synchro summon. This card is awesome because you make it, you trigger your graveyard effects, and then you can tag out into other Cool Tunes, and then you can quick synchro on your opponent's turn again. There's a couple of really neat implications here. It specifies non-synchro tuners, which means you can recycle hand traps, because one of them gets added to your hand, and you're not forced to synchro summon with that specific one, right? You can add back Ash Blossom from grave to your hand, and then synchro summon with something else, or not synchro summon at all. You can recycle Veilers, which is especially relevant because it's not once per turn. You're not even forced to synchro summon with the monster you resummon, because they all have summon effects, right? So a really cool thing you can do with this card is, let's say you have a board of multiple Cool Tune monsters, you can bring back Cool Tune Rico, but not synchro with the Cool Tune Rico. Instead, you synchro summon with something else, and then the Rico will get its on summon effect as well to add a Cool Tune from deck to hand, and then that can add like Clip, and then you can use Clip to interrupt your opponent, and so on and so forth. And all that in the process, you're like recycling an effect veiler and stuff like that. So really, really interactive and powerful card, Cool Tune Remix. One of the harder cards to know when to use as well, but really, really strong. Then we've got Cool Tune RS, which is much simpler and easier to use, but still really powerful. Gains 300 attack for each tuner in the graveyard. This card gets massive really quickly. Do not underestimate how big this card gets. Like, I've been summoning like 4,000 plus attack Cool Tune RS like as soon as turn 2, because you really rack up tuners in the graveyard quickly with this deck, and it counts your opponent's tuners as well. So if you're playing a mirror match, or if your opponent just has like Ash Blossoms and stuff like that, like this card gets massive. The levels of your opponent's monsters with 1700 or less original attack are increased by 1. So this randomly just FTKs yummy, because everything becomes level 2 and they can't really make their synchros. So that's fun, I suppose. Another polarizing aspect about this deck. During the main phase, quick effect, banish a tuner from your grave, target a face-up card your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of the turn, right? So this one's really simple. You banish a tuner and target, negate a card, which includes spell cards, of course, and that is really powerful. Much simpler to use than Remix, but still very effective. We have Cool Tune Loudness War. Other tuners you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. Also, your opponent cannot target them with card effects. When your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can banish a Cool Tune monster from your grave, apply that monster's effect that activates when it's sent to the grave as synchro material. That's one of the ways how you can duplicate these effects, even though technically all of them are once per turn in the graveyard. You have ways of duplicating them another time with Cool Tune Loudness War, so you can, for example, get another monster pop if you need it, get another spell trap pop, get another extra deck rip, or get another look at your opponent's top decks, or even, I don't know, add another spell and copy Rotary and look at their hand again. Or, you know, Rotary also has the effect of putting a card from the grave to the bottom of the deck, so you could copy that and get some graveyard interruption as well, right? So really flexible card. Doesn't come up that often, but is quite cool. And if you have the field spell, it can get big at 3,300, which is strong. All right, and then the new ones, we have Cool Tune Crackle is Cool Tune Clip plus a tuner monster. If this card is synchro summoned, you can look at your opponent's extra deck, and if you do, banish face up one card from it until the end phase. Then you can make this card gain attack equal to that monster's attack. This is a targeted extra deck rip, which is much stronger than, of course, Clip's random banish, of course, but this is only until the end phase. Still, if you can use this to buy yourself a turn because your opponent can't do a certain thing from the extra deck, really powerful. But it even gets better. If this synchro summoned card is sent to the grave, you can special summon this card, then you can apply this effect, look at your opponent's extra deck, banish 2 cards from it until the end phase. So if you can manage to summon this card on your opponent's turn, and then synchro with it, you're basically looking at your opponent's extra deck and taking 3 cards away from it temporarily. They will get those cards back in the end phase, but you can still really effectively skip certain turns. Like imagine playing against Draco Tail and you can pull this off. You can banish all 3 Arthalions, for example. They'll get it back later, but they might not be able to have a really strong turn because of that. Or then like combo decks as well. Like you take away 3 really key combo pieces, especially if you combine it with like the things we've already learned. Like we have random banishes from Clip. So based off what you hit of Clip, you can then decide what you banish of Crackle and basically ruin an entire strategy for a turn. Zalen the Shackled Dragon is a new card that is basically made for this deck, even though it's not a Cool Tune card. But it is a level 7 Dragon Synchro tuner that needs a tuner and a synchro monster, and it's a very unique take on an Omni Negate because you can essentially only use it as Chainlink 3 or higher, because it says when a card or effect is activated in response to another card or effect, quick effect, you can either negate the first effect or you can negate the second effect. So essentially what it means is you can only activate it as Chainlink 3 or higher, and you can then negate either the Chainlink before it or the Chainlink before that, which is neat because it basically plays around chain blocking, but it's also more balanced than an Omni Negate in a way, because you cannot negate Chainlink 1 with it unless you respond to it. And then the way it works, let's say your opponent activates Raigeki and you want to stop it, right? You have to chain to the Raigeki before you can activate Zalen. So let's say you chain Cool Tune Synchro that you have face down, right? And then your opponent chains Ash. At this point, it's too late for you to negate the Raigeki with Zalen because the Raigeki is Chainlink 1. Zaylin would be chainlink 4, which means Zaylin as chainlink 4 can only negate chainlink 3 or 2, so the Raigeki is resolving, right? You can negate the Ash Blossom with the Zaylin, but you can't negate the Raigeki in this. And then last but not least, for the Cool Tune extra deck monsters, we have Cool Tune B2B, which is a level 10, needs a tuner and a synchro or one or more synchro monsters. The level of your opponent's monsters are increased by 2, so once again, randomly destroys Yami and Exceed strategies. Your tuners can make a second attack during each battle phase. This includes itself, because it is a tuner, so it's 6,400 damage on its own, but like with RS and stuff, like a lot of damage. When your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can target a tuner in your grave or banishment, except the level 10, add it to your hand or special summon it, then immediately after this effect resolves, you can synchro summon a monster. You can use this effect twice per turn. This card is your basically end game boss monster, and if this card hits the board, you're gonna have a really good time. This card is really fun to play with, but like essentially every time your opponent activates a monster effect twice per turn, you get recursion plus a synchro. You can add back hand traps because you can add to your hand or special summon any tuner, or you just bring back your cool tunes into rotation and synchro with them, right? Like this is really, really strong. It can summon back the other synchros as well and get their effects. It can recycle like RS to get like a negation or whatever. Like really, really powerful and fun card. I hope I was able to give you an understanding. I know this is a little bit longer, but I feel like this is what you have to do. If a new archetype comes out, you got to understand how all the cards work. Let me know what you think of the Cool Tune deck. I'm going to add 1 or 2 games from my first stream to try and showcase how the gameplay can look. From my first understanding is kind of mid-rangey. The ceiling for the deck isn't that high. I mean, of course, if you go uninterrupted, you can still do some pretty crazy things. But for the most part, you're setting up a couple of synchros on your first turn, like 1 or 2 synchros. Set up as many of these as you can. And then on the opponent's turn is where the action starts. When you try to synchro summon on your opponent's turn, take away some of their resources, pop some cards, and so on and so forth. I can see that it's a polarizing playstyle, you know, like it potentially isn't very fun to get random stuff banished from your extra deck, or your opponent looks at your hand and top of deck and manipulates it and stuff like that. It is a very unique playstyle in that way. The gameplay that I've seen from the deck, we've watched some OCG duels from it as well, didn't feel that toxic. It felt fine, but in theory, I can definitely see why people have some problems with it. So let me know your thoughts. There's, of course, other things that you can do with the deck. We're going to explore it more, especially when this deck comes out in the TCG. It's a force to be reckoned with, so it's going to be around for a while, probably. There's going to be experimentations. We're going to talk about other things. But for now, this is a basic list that you might expect. Of course, it has a lot of hand traps in it because they're all tuners. So that's synergy with the deck. You can recycle them. You can even synchro with them sometimes. Like, for example, let's say you normal summon Cool Tune Mix and your opponent imperms it. If you have like an Ash in hand, that is a play at least. You can play with that. We also have the side frames for that reason, because level 2 is actually quite the good level for these cards to have as extenders in hand, quote unquote. Because then with Cool Tune Mix, you can go into Cool Tune Track Maker, which is really good. Of course, also being high quality hand traps to begin with. Then I also have Veiler, which is especially good in this deck because you can recycle it multiple times. It's not once per turn. We have Ash and Bell. Some people in the OCG are playing Ghost Ogre. I'm not convinced yet. Ghost Ogre, I think, is especially good against this deck because removal is strong against it. So if this deck takes over, then maybe Ghost Ogre becomes better. The only non-tuner hand trap that I'm playing is Fuwa at the moment. And other than that, it's just all of the Cool Tune engine at 3 at the moment, except for Playlist, because why play Playlist if you can play Synchro? That's the deck. I hope you enjoy the games that I'm adding after this, and let me know what you think of Cool Tune. Will this be tier 0? Tier 0, probably not, but it is a really good deck, and if the OCG is anything to go by, it is the most represented deck there at the moment. So I think there's a good chance that it's going to be good, but not necessarily just like the only deck you can play or whatever. See, this hand kind of slaps already. I think we just start with Synchro Overtake. I wish this was Gamma. So, I want to go Cool Tune Mix, I think, so that I can normal summon Cool Tune Rico. Cool Tune Q, I mean. I want to go Q, and then Q Special Rico, I think. Let's do it as our additional normal summon. How does this deck perform under Maxi and Fuwa? I think it's fine, depending on your hand, but we're gonna find. Like this hand, for example, right? If we got Impermed or if we got Fuwa on this, we could have just added with this, set this, and passed. Because we already had Clip and Synchro to interrupt on the opponent's turn. I think that would have been fine. So, are we gonna summon Rico and search Rotary, or are we gonna summon Rotary? But if I summon Rotary, how do I get to... How do I get to Rico? I think I might get Rico. So, add Rotary. And now I want to go ahead and make Track Maker, I believe, with Q plus Rotary. And so here we can already do one of the crazier things this deck can do. So what we're gonna do is Chainlink 1 Maker to search for a Cool Tune card. Chainlink 2 Q. And then Chainlink 3 is Rotary to look at their hand. So we're gonna look at their hand. Okay, it is Mitsurugi. Purification. I don't know what this does, dude. Nothing in hand, right? Yeah, nothing in hand. 2 Aramasa, Ritual. So the thing is, like, that's the crazy part, right? We know that if we stop this Aramasa, they don't have a play. I don't have a way to stop Aramasa right now, but I can get one. Called by the Grave, Megalith, Anastasis. Okay, I think we just banish the Anastasis and leave Called by on top, because it's not a starter. Yeah. Leave Called by on top so we know what's going on. This can add... Honestly, it doesn't really matter at this point. This is where basically all I need to do, and this is the crazy part about this, I know their entire hand now, so all I need to do is summon RS to negate Aramasa, and they can't do shit about that. They cannot... literally what I do now doesn't matter as long as I do that. So as long as I summon RS, I win. I don't know. I don't even know what else I should be doing at this point. They still have Ritual. Okay, they can Ritual from deck with tributing 2 Aramasas, but that doesn't do anything. Let me get... No, mix. And the thing is, like, the Track Maker was summon number 4, right? So if they had Nib, I would have known about it. I'm sure I could have done more, but I just want to showcase, like, what the basic idea is. So we know they have Called by, Aramasa, Ritual, whatever the Megalith card is, and Great Purification, right? Okay, if I stop that, then they summon Aramasa. Yeah. Negate that. I can make Zalen on res, right? Yeah. Wait, but no, Zalen doesn't work. They can outplay Zalen with the called by I gave them. Hold up. But then I can negate something else, yeah. Take another peek. Maybe we can hit the Saji. Oh. Does this matter? I'll just banish this. I'll leave talents on top. Negate the first effect, negate the first. Eh? Okay, dude, that is so counterintuitive. When a card is affected, oh, I see. I see why, but that is so stupid. Come on. That is worded so terribly, dude. How does it work in the TCG? Dude, you just communicate with your opponent what you're trying to negate. It's not that difficult in TCG. But no, yeah, I lose now, I guess. That's karma? Karma for what? For trying to showcase how the new deck works? Can I even do anything? I can summon Frack Maker, I guess. Oh, they play Megalith. I forgot. I thought this was just gonna search. At least we tried. I mean, it's enough for me to know that I would have won this game if I knew how the card worked in Master Duel. This was not a skill issue or anything like that. This was straight up just, you know, it's whatever. We literally just lost that because that is very counterintuitive the way that's worded. But now we know, and we're never gonna make that mistake again. Great showcase. Dude, I'm pissed because it was a good showcase of how the deck can function, right? Until that point. Oh, this hand cooks. Love that for me. Extra deck rip time. I mean, I guess I can try to rip Requiem, yeah, but I think I'll just ash it. Why Fuwa before Larry summon? Because they might think I have Maxi in hand and not negate it if they have the thing. We can make RS, yeah. But RS is not that crazy right here. We also don't have follow-up if we do. So they have another engraver in hand, I know that. This is really bad. The problem is they just make Caesar here. But if I make RS first, then... Oh shit, it's Orchist. Or you could have just activated Engraver. Okay, I guess this marks the first win because of a clip extra deck banish. Because I feel like we just won that because we sniped the Nightmare out of the extra deck. I did not expect this to happen so soon. But here we are. All right, and just with 1 day of playing Kewl and Master Duel, I can already say it's one of the more unique decks I've ever played, and it's been a while since I've played a deck that I've made so many mistakes with when I played it for the first time, but that's also part of the fun for it for me. I've been enjoying my games with it a lot. Of course, you know, we've encountered some games where like we've been randomly extra deck ripping or looking at hands and figuring out what to hand trap in order to just win the game. But for the most part, it's been pretty interactive games, so I've been enjoying it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I wish I could show you more games, but then the video is going to be way too long. So for that, make sure to check out the description of this video for links to my Plus and my VOD channel, where you can see either the full stream or also individual highlight games that I occasionally upload on the Plus channel. Make sure to subscribe to those channels. Without further ado, thank you all so much for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye. Peace.